People who got fired on the first day of the job? What happened? Story 1. Not me, but happened when I was working at McDonald's. New guy came in, and when we saw that he was trashing patties if they had been sitting too long, he ate one. And then he started just eating them from the supply. Dude must have inhaled like 10 to 12 patties over a couple of hours after repeatedly being told to stop. Eventually, he started making himself a burger with the buns and eating it as well. Got fired the first day on the job. I'm still convinced that he had no real plans of working and just wanted to see how many free burgers he could eat before getting canned. Story 2. I kind of inadvertently got a guy fired on his first day. I was working at a factory job. I had been there a couple of years at this point, and they had just hired a new batch of people. One of the people they just hired, let's call him Ed, I knew from school. He was a strange dude. He always had an off-putting smile on his face, like he just farted and is waiting for you to smell it. He also thought that being friendly is punching your arm, which always was really annoying to me. I think he wanted to be friends in school, but it just didn't really happen. We were cordial when we met in public, though, and anyway, Ed gets hired. He sees me and comes over to talk for a bit. And when he walks off, my supervisor pulls me to the side and says, "If that guy messes with you, let me know." Okay, weird, right? Later that day, he is being trained at a machine behind me, and we were running different parts and mine runs slower. He decides that that means that I suck or something. He walks up behind me, slaps the back of my head, hard enough that my hat goes flying off, and yells, "Hurry up, slowpoke." My job was working with torches, so needless to say, that pissed me off. At lunchtime, I pulled the supervisor to the side and let him know what happened, and that it was a dangerous thing since I was handling dangerous equipment. He tells me that he'll take care of it. I come back from lunch, and Ed is being escorted out of the building. Come to find out, Ed thought it would be cool to brag to my supervisor that he used to kick my butt in high school all the time. As far as I knew, we were cool. I had no idea that he told them anything of the sort because it didn't effing happen. So, when I complained, he was instantly fired. They were protecting me from my high school bully that I didn't even know existed. Well, I guess Ed learned a valuable lesson on his first day. Don't mess with the torch guy. And also, don't go around making up stories about bullying people in high school because karma has a way of catching up to you. Yeah, at least now you can work without the constant fear of an arm punch or a hard slap on your head, so there's a silver lining, right? Story 3. I'm a developer. We hired a guy who did an amazing interview. He really seemed to know his stuff and was clearly very intelligent and capable. On his first day, he saw some old code in a crappy legacy app, which wasn't great, and he went crazy. Like, began ranting at his desk, then stood up from his desk and started shouting at his screen, and then started verbally abusing the developer he thought had written the code. He hadn't. The other developer just sat and took the abuse calmly and tried to explain that, hey, it wasn't his code, and anyway, he knew it was old and poorly written, but there was no plan for the team to rebuild it. But it was futile, and he barely got a word in, with the other guy just shouting him down in an endless tirade. He had a full meltdown and was beyond civilized conversation. The project manager had to intervene and have an emergency meeting with the MD and the developer, and they mutually agreed that he wasn't right for the company. The guy eventually said that he had Asperger's and had left many jobs for the same reason. Story 4. I got a job as a waiter at an Australian-themed steakhouse. No, not that one. And they had me buy construction boots as part of their uniform and a pair of black shorts totaling $50. I had never worked as a waiter before, so they had me shadow one of their waitresses. I followed her for drink orders at 2 tables, and then she told the boss it wasn't going to work out. No idea what happened, and that was my last $50. In retrospect, that place just screams you don't want to work here, but I'm still mad about it a decade and a half later. Story 5. I almost got fired at Subway for putting too many olives on subs. Now, for the record, it was 6 olives per foot long and 3 per 6 inch. Anyone knows how ridiculously stingy that is. Also, if they wanted extra olives, they had to pay, and you were allowed to give double that, and that's it. I pleaded to keep my job and only followed the olive rule when the manager was around, though. I piled them high for customers that I liked. Story 6. I got hired as an independent contractor for some over-the-phone tech work. Hours were 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, that's perfect. I go in, I get acquainted, start taking calls, and hours go by. I'm wondering when I get lunch. Newsflash, no lunch, no breaks. Independent contractor or not, pretty sure here in the US, you got to give people some breaks and a lunch at some point in a 10-hour shift. There's like some kind of law about that, I feel for sure. So I tell my new boss, look, I'm starving. I'm going to go get something to eat. I'll be back in an hour. He said that if you leave, don't bother coming back. So I left and never went back. It's a good thing that you didn't work for a cannibal, I guess, or you might have been the lunch break. But seriously, who doesn't give their employees breaks and lunch during a 10-hour shift? Sounds like a company that needed a break from violating labor laws. Story 7. This was about 10 years ago and not mine, but a homeboy of mine got an awesome job at a tech company out here in California. We're talking B+, A- level job with a big name company not more than 6 months out of college. His resume was outstanding, his interviews were amazing, and he impressed all the directors at the handshake party. After spending a full day there, he was given the offer letter. He got everything that he wanted. He was given the 5 p.m. HR paperwork treatment, shown his future office, introduced to the office pool, and was formally announced through company email. He then shook hands for the last time around 8 p.m. and walked out of the door to his car. My friend couldn't contain his excitement and then did a burnout in the parking lot as he was leaving. He figured the parking lot was empty and no one would notice, and he got a call the next morning. Based on your reckless actions last night in the parking lot, we've decided to terminate our working relationship. Story 8. Worked at Pita Pit in college for a day, and about halfway through my first shift, the manager asked if I have a car. I said yes, why? And he said that I had to go get it and deliver for him till close because the driver he was into called out because she was too hungover. She said this on speaker in front of like half of the people waiting in line and everyone else who was working. Now, if I didn't, he said I was going to be fired. He also told me that I had to pay for my own gas and give all the tips to him since I was still making $8.20 an hour instead of the $4.50 an hour the drivers made plus tips. He handed me 7 bags and a list of MapQuest directions for them, and 3 of the deliveries were 10 plus miles away. The furthest being 17 miles in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, that just screamed deliverance crime scene. The boss called me not even 15 minutes later, screaming at me for not making all the deliveries yet, and said that once I came back and gave him his tips, I was fired. With 5 deliveries left to go, I said, screw it, and went to my friend's place with the rest of the food. Screw that manager. Story 9. I don't know if this counts, but my dad was interviewed for a job at a Dallas engineering firm in the 60s. They were up in Detroit, did a bunch of bulk interviews, processed offers on the spot. He was well qualified, and it was a good offer. He gave notice at his current job at GM and packed the family up and drove down. When he showed up on the first day, they met him and said, well, the guys in engineering decided that they didn't want to work with any non-white engineers, and they're supposed to call you 2 weeks ago and withdraw the offer. So that's unfortunate and disappointing. It's incredibly disheartening to hear that someone would be denied a good job opportunity based on something as irrelevant as their race. It's good that your father was well qualified and was able to find other good job opportunities, but it's still frustrating to think about the missed potential and the discrimination that he faced. Hopefully, as a society, we can continue to work towards equality and fairness for all individuals, regardless of their background. This is just silly. Story 10. Not me, but I was working there at the time, and I'd worked at a Panera when I was in college as a shift supervisor. We were looking for a new prep guy, and my manager interviewed this guy named Hennessy. No joke. I told my manager I didn't like him and not to hire him, but he did anyway. His first day, he shows up and we give him some training on what to do, and he gets back to work. After about 4 hours, my manager asks if he can take a minute to go and grab a new box of chips. And out of nowhere, the guy snaps and says, bitch, you don't know me, I'm from the hood. My manager, without skipping a beat, says, yeah, and I'm from management, so leave. Fired him on the spot. Story 11. I'm late here, but I have a really good one. Not of me being fired, but of someone that I fired 4 hours into their first day. When I was in school, I worked as an assistant manager in a deli. In all those years, this one girl stood out as the absolute worst employee imaginable. She was just so stupid. Things she did included, 1, customer comes up and asks for an extra side of ranch dressing, and we have those little plastic dressing cups all over the place. But does she use one? No. Her solution is to grab a napkin and pour some ranch dressing on it and hand it to the customer like that. Another one, when it was a bit slow, I said, hey, why don't you take a moment to wipe down the tables? Obviously, I meant empty the tables, but I look over to see a whole group of customers cradling their food and drinks in their arms because she had asked them to take all the stuff off the table so that she could wipe it down underneath. A third one, like most restaurants, behind the counter and in the kitchen, we have floor drains. That is so that at the end of the night, when we wash the floors, we can use a copious amounts of water to get them really clean and then squeegee the water into the floor drain. So a customer comes up and says that he got the wrong drink, diet versus regular or whatever, and I said just pour it out and give him what he asked for. Rather than take 3 steps to the sink and pour the drink out there, she turns around and pours it into the floor drain, getting soda all over the floor and splashing it onto our pants. A fourth one while fixing a turkey sandwich, in plain view of the customer and myself. She kept popping pieces of the turkey into her mouth and eating them. Another one, as the customer walks up to give her order, she says to her, "Do you mind if I go to the bathroom real quick before I take your order? I gotta go really bad." Another one was when a customer asked for black pepper on his sandwich. At the time, it was the holidays, and all of our salt and pepper shakers were these unique Christmas ones. You know, one was Santa Claus, one was Rudolph, etc. She literally comes up to me, all frustrated, and says that she can't tell whether the shaker in her hand is salt or pepper. I grab it, shake a tiny bit into my hand, and say, "It's salt." Another one was when a customer asked for an egg white omelet. She asked me if he still had to pay for the whole egg. There was this other time where the customer asked for a medium coffee with part skim milk, part whole milk. She poured the coffee into 2 separate cups, one with skim milk and the other with whole milk. And the final straw, in the middle of taking an order, she pulls her phone out and answers a text. The crazy part was when I told her that she should just leave, it didn't work out, and she wouldn't come back, she kept acting like it was my fault for not explaining stuff to her. Like the rule that you shouldn't answer a text in the middle of waiting on a customer, or that she didn't know we weren't supposed to use the floor drain to pour out drinks, or that she didn't know that she wasn't supposed to ever tell a customer that she had to go to the bathroom, or that she didn't know that there was a rule against eating the turkey off a customer's sandwich. And yeah, she was a college student. Story 12. When I was 17, I got a job at Chuck E. Cheese. I worked the front door, and once in a while I had to put on the Chucky costume and parade around the place. Now here's the deal with those. Kids are jerks. They kept constantly running up to me and hugging me, punching me in the crotch. After 5 hours of this, I'd had enough. I purposely didn't attach the head to the body, and it was supposed to be buttoned into place. So after the 20th or so time being nut-checked, I had enough. I backed up, did a stupid little dance, grabbed my headpiece, and slowly began to twist it around my head. The kids started to freak out. Some screamed, some cried, the parents started protesting, the older kids started laughing. The attendant who was with me fell out in laughter. I thought it was hilarious. However, the restaurant manager who hired me didn't think that it was that funny. So I got ushered out the back door and banned from that particular Chuck E. Cheese. Do I think it was worth it? Why, yes, I do. Well, it sounds like you were the only one who had the last laugh here. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to spin their head around like a possessed animatronic doll after being repeatedly punched in the crotch? Those kids definitely got what was coming to them. But hey, on the bright side, at least you now have a hilarious story to tell about your brief stint as Chuck E. Cheese. Story 13. I wasn't fired on the first day, but I saw someone get fired. I work at a job working in a grocery warehouse, driving a forklift in the freezer section. Now, this freezer was supposed to be kept at negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which means that they actually kept it a little colder. I once saw it at negative 46 on a rainy day. Now, day one, as I'm getting a brief tour around the place by a rotund middle management fellow, we see a group emerge from the freezer. One guy in the middle clutching his mouth, tears in his eyes. You know when kids dare each other to stick their tongues onto poles during the winter? This guy did that of his own volition in this incredibly cold room and had to wait until someone stumbled upon him for rescue. He was fired on the spot. Story 14. When I was in between jobs and early in my tech career, I did some temporary work. Among this work was a manufacturing outfit that needed a few thousand records digitized. Upon the early part of my discovery, I found that they already had most of this data in a giant flat file and were bringing in only 2 new pieces of unique data. I found a few correlation points with just a glance and immediately started scripting. It took around 4 hours to get my script ready, and then all I had to do was enter 2 pieces of unique info per record, and the script would take care of the rest. This was going to be a huge time saver, likely cutting the 5-day job to 1.5 or 2 days. I would be paid the same either way and would be out of their hair days early, so I figured it was a win-win. The lady in charge of me watching me asked me right after lunch on that first day how many records I had completed so far, and I answered her honestly. I had done 4 records, the ones that I had tested my script against, but was going to blast through hundreds before that business day was done. I went back to the desk and computer that they had provided me and started banging through the stack of records. After I had only done about 24 of them, a security type showed up and escorted me out while muttering something about non-performance. I asked to be given 3 minutes to show my script to anyone that cared, but they were not interested at all. I was marched out the side door and was never again used by that temp agency. Those folks just did not understand what I was doing or how powerful scripting is. All they knew was that I spent the morning doing something other than the mind-numbing data entry that they had hired me for. Story 15. I got hired through a temp service to work at a local phone company. No problem, as I'd done tons of telemarketing before and figured that it would be working on the billing or customer service end. Nope. The first day, they had me on the phone with linemen who were up a telephone pole somewhere half across the country asking me which wire to cut. I had no clue what I was doing and had a mini meltdown talking to my supervisor. She asked me how I could possibly not know what I was doing when I had clearly passed the test to get the job. My response was, "Test? What test?" Turns out the temp agency was supposed to give any and all applicants a test to see if they had the experience necessary to do the job. I had a call from the temp agency telling me that I was fired before I got home that day. So it sounds like the temp agency really dropped the ball on this one. I mean, who in their right mind would hire someone to direct linemen on which wire to cut without the proper training or experience? It's like sending a kindergarten teacher to perform open heart surgery. And to make matters worse, they didn't even bother giving you the necessary test to determine your suitability for the job in the first place. It's a good thing that you had a mini meltdown and got out of there before someone got electrocuted or lost phone service in half the country or something. It just goes to show that you can never be too careful when it comes to temp agencies and job placements. Always do your research and make sure that you're fully prepared for whatever challenges may come your way. In the comments, does anyone else have a story about a job that you ended up being very unqualified for?